Hey friends, before we get into this week's episode, I would like to invite my Austin people to my upcoming socially distant outdoor yoga event, Yin Yoga and Healing Harp at Tree Garden. We recently had to postpone the event due to the weather. The event now will be held on Sunday, June 6th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. If you haven't yet been to Tree Garden, it is a lovely outdoor space. We'll be nestled in nature in East Austin. Talented musician Andrea Cortez of Mind Body Music Center will be playing the harp as I teach restorative yin yoga. It will be a relaxing evening to remember. You can check out the event link in the show notes. Please reserve your spot as space is limited. Now, let's get on to this week's episode. Welcome, friends, to the Yoga and Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Weber, a yoga and Pilates teacher who is living and learning every day in the lovely Austin, Texas. And I'm just so curious about all things yoga and. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. This show celebrates the hardworking people in the mind-body community who are being of service and are contributing to the world in creative and innovative ways. Today, I am so excited to sit down and chat with my friend, sound healer, meditation and yoga teacher, and Buddhist, Kim Humphrey. Kim will share with us a very special two-part series about the fascinating and sometimes misunderstood topic of yoga and Buddhism. She will explain some of the more complex concepts and what sometimes we might get wrong about Buddhism in the yoga community. And I learn so much from this episode. I feel like I have a deeper understanding and respect for Buddhism after having this illuminating conversation. I know you will enjoy this chat just as much as I did. Now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode, y'all. Joining us on today's episode is sound healer, meditation teacher, yoga teacher, and Buddhist, Kim Humphrey. Hey, Kim, how are you?
Hey, Ashley, I'm doing great this morning.
I'm so happy to have you on. Thank you for taking time out of your day for this interview. Would you like to introduce yourself just a little bit more for those who may not know you yet?
Yeah, I have all of those labels, right? All of those different roles kind of within my jobs now. I was, I guess I still am a speech therapist as well. And, had my own yoga practice throughout the end of high school and college and my first professional career. And then, decided that it's these practices that have helped me so much, through my path. And that's what I want to share. So yeah, now I get to have all of those wonderful labels and share these teachings.
I'm so excited about our conversation today, yoga and Buddhism. But I'm curious about yoga right now, currently in your own life. What does that look like exactly?
Yeah, so it's become a moment-to-moment practice, right? There are certain practices that are consistent, right? I have meditation sadhanas from my teacher that's a consistent practice. And when it comes to movement, when it comes to really the other limbs, it's very much a feeling in and just what's needed today, what's needed right now. And I just feel so grateful to have had so many amazing teachers along the way that I kind of have that bank of practices to draw on now.
Let's talk about Buddhism. What or how did you start your journey with Buddhism?
Yeah, I actually started my journey with Buddhism through yoga. I actually met my Buddhist teacher when she was subbing for one of my favorite yoga teachers. right? And for anyone who's ever experienced that, there's always a little trepidation with that, at
Mm.
least on my part. So I can say I wasn't all too happy that she was teaching that class. And by the end of it, I knew that that this was going to change my path. Somehow she was going to open up something new for me. And yeah.
Wow. So your Buddhist teacher found you in a way, like you just showed up and you're like, oh, who's this woman subbing? And then by the end of it, you're like, oh, I really like this teacher. And then that turned into your Buddhist teacher?
Yeah. Yeah. She's just she's amazing. Right. And she knows so much, both from the heart and also intellectually, and so I felt something from her. And also, now I realize how skillful it was that she was weaving these really deep teachings into an asana class, which is part of what I felt. But yeah, I started asking her questions. There was something about her that I think, just like with any teacher, when you recognize that someone has something to teach you, right? There's something about them that you're like, I want to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
You
I totally.
know, like I don't quite know what it is, but there is something, right? Like about her presence that I've been looking for, right? And here it is. And so, I started asking questions, and I didn't know at that point, actually, that you ask a teacher to be your teacher. I
Mm.
didn't know this. And so I had been practicing yoga for, gosh, like 16 years, something at that point. And there had been these teachers along the way that, I would like follow them to their classes, and I would so want to be part of that inner circle, and just didn't know. I thought I was kind of waiting for an invitation.
Ah, yeah.
And like it had to be explicitly taught to me of like, no, that's not how it happens. And I just got so lucky, actually, well, luck or grateful how it happened, right? That someone else had asked for a teaching, and that she invited a group of us who she said had asked in our own way, right? That I had been asking her these questions and didn't know specifically to ask for this, but yeah.
Can you reveal who the teacher is?
Sure. Her name is Denise Deniger. She,
Okay.
she's a beloved teacher in Austin, in Texas, right? Actually across the country. And she's taken a step back from teaching asana, from teaching in studios. But I'm grateful that some of us have asked enough that she's still teaching us in that capacity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is such a vulnerable thing to ask someone to be your teacher. And I don't think in our society that's ever really, I mean, you sign up for a class, you enroll for a class, but you don't ask. And then the answer potentially could be no. That's too vulnerable. So it makes sense that we wouldn't really know that right off the cuff.
Yeah, right. It's not really part of how we do it. And those feelings in ourselves, right? That's part of the important aspect of it. You have to say, I don't know, in order to be able to learn, right? If you don't make yourself vulnerable in that way of saying, I don't know, and I think you have something that I want to learn, like, please teach me, would you be willing to teach me? Then there's a way that we're not ready. They talk about it in Buddhism. They say to be a good student, right? They talk about the 3 problems of the pot. And actually, sometimes in commentaries, you'll just hear, the 3 problems of the pot, right? And in our culture, right, we would just skip right over that. But it's actually really important. It's part of this foundational step, this first step of the Buddhist path, which is find a teacher. And it doesn't just mean find a teacher and sign up for their class, right? Like find someone who can teach you. It means find someone who will teach you, right?
Yeah.
So the 3 problems of the pot, they say, you know, first, there are 2 ways to think of it. First, the pot has to be open, right? Because we can understand, and I think in yoga we use this this metaphor a lot of pouring the teachings, right? That the student is a vessel, and the teacher is kind of pouring the teachings into the student and filling their vessel with what they've received from their teacher. And so that first step, that first problem with the pot, it has to be open. You can't fill it with anything. It'll just spill over. And another way to say that is it has to be empty, right? It can't already be full. So we have to say, I don't know, right? I'm ready to receive. And then the second, right? The second problem of the pot, it has to be clean, right? You're not going to pour these precious teachings into a dirty pot, or they're going to get contaminated, just like you wouldn't pour soup into a dirty pot, or it would get, you know, you wouldn't be able to eat it at the end. And so, right, that cleanliness, we can look to our ethical foundation, right? Right? If we're going to receive these teachings and then lie and steal, and, you know, that's not very helpful, actually. So the vessel has to be clean. And then they say the pot, it can't have holes in it, right? It has to be a solid container, right? And that's like that idea of in one ear, out the other, right? You have to be able to hold it. You have to be able to retain it. Or again, it's not going to be helpful. It's not worthwhile. Like you can pour as much as you want in that pot, but yeah, it's not going to hold it.
That's fascinating. I don't know anything about Buddhism anyway, so I don't know why I would think I would know anything about the problems with the three
problems with a pot.
Okay.
Right? Can also be the 3 problems of a student. Right? And I think it is, you know, it's something that we've really lost. I think, as I understand it, the Buddhist teacher-student relationship is actually how the yoga teacher-student relationship used to be. You know, and it really is kind of our capitalist colonization of the practices that have changed it to, well, yeah, I'm going to your class, I'm paying you money, right? So now you should be my teacher.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yes, like you can teach in that general group capacity like that. But like if you're going to go do private sessions with a teacher, you have to ask them. Right? And so I feel a lot of teachers actually in our community trying to get back to that in a certain way, that we're all really navigating this capitalist marketplace, but then also there's this kind of longing for integrity, and this feels wrapped up in that.
Totally. I completely get that. Would you care to talk a little bit more about the teacher-student relationship or with the Buddhist teacher? You touched on it a little bit, but I feel like there's more there.
Yeah, you know, and so, you know, in one sense in Buddhism, right, and in all of life, I think in all of traditions, we can understand everything as our teacher, right? Like anything that we interact with is teaching us about how we see the world and how we respond to it, right? So like that is a great teacher. The world itself, you know, they say that the annoying person or the challenging person is actually, it's like a wish-giving gem, you know, because like if we want to learn patience, you know, like how are we going to do that if we don't have a challenge? And so that the world itself and all of its challenges, right, can be seen as our teacher. And I hear this a lot, within our yoga communities too, this understanding, which is so beautiful. And in my experience within the Buddhist tradition, the teacher-student relationship it's a personal relationship. And I think in the West too, we've had experiences with a lot of teachers who have taken advantage of that relationship, right? So I think, rightly so, there's a bit of a wariness. And it's really a very precious relationship between the teacher and the student, because you started with this foundation of saying, I don't know, and I want to learn from you. I think you have something, right, that could really help me. And so we start with that personal relationship. And it's actually the first step on the Buddhist path. The Lam Rim, or the steps on the path, really lays out different scopes, different goals, right? Different goals on the path, and the steps, right, to get to these spiritual goals. And the first step is find a teacher, right? And they say you can actually break down the Lam Rim into just 2 steps: find a teacher and everything else.
Oh,
because everything else depends upon that first step, on having a teacher to teach you. And yes, there are books. There are so many books, and we tend to be a very intellectual culture, right? Where we think, well, I can just read it in a book. And trust me, like, this was me for my first 16 years in yoga. Like, I took this 3-month-long trip down to Mexico after I finished grad school, like, really in this place, like, I'm not sure. I packed a suitcase full of yoga books. I went to this one studio, the only studio in this little town, every day, right? 6 days a week. They didn't have class on Sunday. And I read the Yoga Sutra for the first time alone, and this was one of the teachers that, like, I so wanted him to ask me to be a student. Like, I wanted that so deeply, and I just didn't understand, right? And I thought I could just read it in a book. And you can think of that kind of like, can you learn to play classical piano from a book? Like, yeah, maybe there are some people who will read the right things and have that genius, right, where they're able to do it. And for most of us, right, like, there are steps on the path, but it's a really individual path. Are you playing too soft, or are you playing too hard? Right? Like, a personal teacher teaching you is so profound in that kind of personal mirror. Really, where they're reflecting back to you, right? How you're showing up. And it can be really uncomfortable to look at. And so I kind of see that too, and that, like, yeah, if I don't ask someone to be my teacher, I can keep my blind spots. There's no one pointing it out to me, and I don't really have to look at it. So yeah, it's a deeply personal relationship.
Somewhat recently, I had Brandy Jo Perkins and Caroline Caswell, owners of Earth Commons, on the show. Check out episode number 62 when you get a chance. Earth Commons is so much more than just an apothecary. They offer all types of things, and they offer classes. And I have been attending their virtual Mystery Herb class monthly and have been learning so much about herbs. This class has taught me about having a relationship with herbs versus kind of my old way of just memorizing what they do from a book. I have benefited greatly. Not only has my nervous system improved, but my digestive system has gotten better from the support of these herbs. Fun fact, this podcast is fueled by Earth Commons herbs. I have a warm cup of herbal tea with every interview, every recording, every editing session. Right now, I'm drinking a combination of Tulsi and passion flower tea. Also, as a ritual for producing each episode, I light a vetiver bundle, and that helps with grounding. Earth Commons is so affordable. They offer both really fun items, and then they also offer medicinal products. So there's something for everyone when you shop there. You can check them out if you're in the Austin area at 813 Springdale Road, or visit them online at earth-commons.com. I'll link all their info in the show notes, so you're just one click away from connecting with them. Remember, when you support local business, you're also supporting your community as well as supporting a dream. Now go get yourself some herbs and support yourself too. And we're back. Well, I'm curious about maybe also the oral tradition behind it. For instance, and this is not Buddhist practices or teachings, but I'm learning about herbalism, and my herb teachers, my herbalist teachers are telling me, this is based in an oral tradition. So, you can read and memorize what echinacea does and all that, but, you're going to have all this info in your head and you're not really going to feel what that herb does for you. And you're not going to have people to talk to reflect on that. And really the truth is, she's like, everyone's different. This herb might affect someone one way over here, and then it might affect you completely different. And it's good to get this kind of perspective. So I'm just curious, is it because it's based in oral tradition as well that it's so essential to have a real living Buddhist teacher in front of you that's not a book?
Yes, so much so. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because, even a lot of these texts, they say they're written in what they call twilight language, that you actually can't even understand it if you try to go read it. And that's on purpose.
Oh,
right? They say it's on purpose to protect the teachings, first of all, and then to protect the practitioner, because some of these they're powerful. Right? Like if we start doing these practices on our own, or if we start doing these meditations on our own, if we start having these experiences without support, it can become very, very groundless. This is also where I'm very grateful for my teacher. It's actually one of the first things that she said to me was no, because I asked her for certain practices or teachings, and I had been practicing yoga nidra and some deep meditations, for, I don't know, at that point, probably about 5 or 6 years, and felt like I had some understanding. I was having these experiences, and yet I was so ungrounded, I was very floaty, and she that's one of the things I saw in her, right? Was this deep kind of rootedness and also this wisdom. And yeah, she said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Get grounded, from such a place of love. She's like, I don't want to see you go crazy. Right? Like, you need to be connected to the earth, or whatever realizations you have won't be helpful here. You'll be floating with that. Yeah.
So what we're kind of touching on all this, like, about what might people get wrong in the community, the yoga community, about Buddhism. And so it sounds like, the first one off the top you touched on was, thinking that we can just learn it in a book. Would you care to elaborate more on what might we get wrong in the yoga community about Buddhism?
Sure. And I want to stress too that the books are so helpful. That there are amazing teachers putting out this wisdom, right? These teachings in the most down to earth, helpful language,
Mm-hmm.
right? That the books are really helpful for everyone. I think for the general public, whether like you want to be Buddhist or not, right? This is about our human experience, and it can be really helpful. You know, that being said, Buddhism is a separate tradition from yoga, right? There are yoga aspects to Buddhism for sure. And it is its own tradition. And a lot of the ideas actually within the Buddhist tradition are also in the yogic traditions, right? We can actually find a lot of it within, the Yoga Sutras and other yogic texts. And, one of the common practices that they have in common, right, is meditation, right? A huge part of yoga is meditation. It is the goal of yoga, right? And meditation is a huge part of the Buddhist path as well. Any spiritual path, really, whether you call it prayer or meditation, right? That contemplation is a huge part of the path. And yet, I think already, saying that within our within our maybe not a community of teachers, right? Because they've done some more learning of this path of yoga, but among the general public who's taking yoga classes, often I'll have students who come to like a yoga nidra class and they go, well, wait, is this yoga? And what they mean is, are we going to move?
Ah.
Right. And so it's this teachable moment, but people are kind of sensitive about it too. And I'm like, well, yeah, this is the point of yoga. Actually, yes, this is most definitely yoga. No, there is no movement in this class. You can move a little before, if you feel like you need to move a little, but yeah, this is definitely yoga. And, and then I think I see in the, then at that kind of level of teachers, right? Where it's like, we've learned the eight limbs from the Yoga Sutra and maybe done some other kind of yogic philosophy studies. There's an understanding that, yeah, the last three limbs are meditation. Physical movement is just one limb. And so meditation is important. And so how do we share, right, meditation with our students? How do we share that with our students? And this comes back to the teacher. When I was doing my 300-hour course, because I'm, pretty passionate about going down this path of meditation, I took one of the core classes on, meditation and pranayama specifically. And actually, the whole 50 hours was pretty much the instructor saying, find a teacher.
Oh.
This isn't something that can be taught universally. I can't teach you all meditation in this room, and you can't teach other people meditation except for one-on-one, because it's so individual, right? And the experiences that you have with it are going to be so individual. And he gave us these examples where he would do these meditations for us. And then we would find that about a third of the class thought it was wonderful and amazing. About a third of the class was like pretty agitated, upset at some points, and about a third of the class was neutral, and that's about how everything is going to be, right? But that really impressed on me too, that our yoga teachers, unless you have a personal teacher, aren't really learning how to teach meditation, right? And the Buddhist path is really, really practical, actually, about meditation tools. And those meditation tools in the Buddhist path are based on a Buddhist foundation, right? And so I kind of see this logic, excuse me, I see this logic in the yoga community where it's like, well, meditation is part of yoga. Meditation is part of Buddhism. I'm a yoga teacher. I can teach meditation. Therefore, I can teach Buddhist meditation.
Mm.
Right? And it feels like this jump where if you don't have the foundation of the Buddhist teachings, there can be misunderstandings, right? So either misunderstandings or just leaving things out because you haven't been taught them. And, we don't know what we don't know. And that's partly why, in the Buddhist path, there's a way that your teacher says when you are ready to be a teacher, right? When they say you have a strong enough foundation and understanding of these teachings, go be of benefit, go teach. And if we don't have that teacher, right, we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know if we have that foundation. And generally, I would say, how would you? Right? How would you? And so, yeah, that's kind of the jump I see. And then misunderstandings, right? Or just kind of some holes that can be helpful and can also sometimes be not helpful.
So like, I think we were talking earlier, compassion with lack of wisdom was something that might be.
Yeah. So that idea of wisdom, right? In Buddhism, so they say there are two wings of the path, right? There's compassion and wisdom, right? And it's actually not so different than the yogic, philosophy and understanding as well. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali speaks at length about the kleshas, right? Or the why can't I think of the word? The mental afflictions, right? And the root, right? The root of these mental afflictions being ignorance, right? The opposite of ignorance is wisdom, right? And at least in my teacher trainings, like we went through the Yoga Sutra and that was touched on, right? This ignorance, right, is the root cause, or I think it talks about ego clinging, right? So this ignorance about how the world works and this ignorance about how we work or how we exist. But it wasn't until I started studying Buddhism that someone actually explained this, right? What is that ignorance? What does that mean? And I found it so helpful to hear, it doesn't mean not knowing something, which is, I think, what we often think of, right? When we say ignorant, someone's ignorant on a topic, right? Like they just don't know about it. They don't have the information. And this understanding that it's not that we don't know something, it's that we think we know it and we're completely wrong.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah. So like we think we know how this world is working out here, right? How we're working, and we're completely wrong. It's 180 degrees.
You don't know what you don't know, but you think you know.
Exactly, right? And that's where it becomes dangerous. That's the root cause of all of our suffering, right? And so in this way, yoga is actually saying this. We could just study yoga, and get this understanding from a teacher. And Buddhism really puts it out there as like this two wings of the path, and there are many ways to say it. We can say compassion and wisdom. We can say form and emptiness, right? Method and wisdom. There are a lot of ways that this is touched on, again, in books, right? Once you've learned it, you can see it, but it might be confusing if you're just reading books, because there are different words that refer, that as we translate, right, these major concepts, it can get lost. And, they say not to teach wisdom to people who aren't ready, right? Because it can be dangerous. And this goes back to my teacher telling me no, right? Like, no, out of my deep love and compassion for you, I'm saying you're not ready.
Yeah.
Like, let's get you ready.
To be continued. I hope that you enjoyed part 1 of this 2-part series about yoga and Buddhism with the knowledgeable Kim Humphrey. Stay tuned for next week's episode, part 2, on yoga and Buddhism. In the meantime, please connect with Kim. All of her info is in the show notes, so you're just one click away from connecting with her. I very much look forward to next week's episode. If you would like us to keep going, please hit that subscribe button. If you liked what you heard, please share the show with your friends. Word of mouth is the best way and the most organic way to stretch this podcast out to new listeners. Also, what helps stretch the podcast out to new listeners is to leave us a glowing 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance for that. Please follow us on Instagram. Our handle is also Yoga and Podcast. Consider joining our official Yoga and Podcast Patreon. There are great member perks such as shout-outs on the show, live virtual yin yoga taught by yours truly. You can even earn official podcast merch over time. We also send you podcast stickers and a love note in the mail when you sign up. To find out more, it's linked in the show notes, but you can go to patreon.com/yoga and podcast. If you would like to be a guest on the show or you have any questions or comments, we love hearing from you. So please email us at yogaandpodcast@gmail.com. The and is spelled out, YOGAAND podcast@gmail. The theme song is performed by the incredible Allie Holder. Sound engineering and guest booking by Bentley the Cat. Social media by Chloe the Kitty. Remember that this podcast is for absolutely everyone. If you are human living on planet Earth, you might benefit from listening to Yoga and Podcast. See you next week.